And our speaker today to get us started is Joanne Stewart from Hope College in Michigan, and you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chip. So Chip, I think, or whoever owns this thing needs to allow me to screen share. Thank you. Oops. So this is partly taken from a 5 slides about that's on Viper that I have now updated for this. So it's Effective Student Learning Groups, the online version. And so I'm really glad you're all here. And the main point that I want to make today is the things that we know about group work in person are equally important, if not more important, online. So I'm going to go back through just some fundamentals of how to make group work. And so you can see this was originally the version, this is our fourfold quadruple bonding activity that we do. And now it's going to have to be, of course, replaced with this kind of group work in the future. And so my goal is to talk about group work in general, and then I'm not going to do a lot with technology. I will say something about Zoom at the end, but I know there's many people on this call that are probably more well-versed in Zoom groups than I am. So I was teaching inorganic in last spring when we had to switch to remote, and I do a lot of small group work in that class, and moved it onto Zoom, which at that time I had to pay for myself because Hope College just didn't think Zoom was the way to go yet. So I got Zoom anyway and used small groups on there, and I was really, really happy with how it went, and I got good feedback from the students on that. All right, so there are 3 main points I want to make about groups. One is that setting up student groups should be done intentionally, and so I'll explain that in greater detail. The second one is that students need to learn and can learn how to be good group members. And then a little bit about how to design, how do you design group activities to maximize the success. So again, this works in person as well as with remote groups. And then a slide that I probably don't need to share, I'll just go through quickly. Why do we like group work? Students practice giving and receiving explanations, and that helps them learn. They interact with different types of people, so that promotes their social development. They can feel connected, engaged, and included, which can promote retention. And then the standard 2 heads are better than 1, more hands make lighter work, and students get a chance to learn to plan and manage their time when they're working in groups. So lots of benefits of doing small group work. All right, so now to my 3 points. Setting up student groups should be intentional. So there are 3 approaches to doing this. The first one is unintentional, and that is using spontaneous groups. And I use that quite a bit, actually. So I use, if I have like a 30-person class, I'll use Zoom breakout rooms and let Zoom make the rooms, and then I may adjust people a little bit before I send them off on their way. Having students count off, turn to your neighbor, etc. The advantages are that it's easy. It's quick and easy to do that. The disadvantages are that the groups may not be sort of diverse enough to get the benefits of doing group work. You may not have students with enough different types of experiences that they're bringing to the group. But I still use spontaneous group formation quite a bit. Another way to do groups is to allow students to self-select. And an advantage for that is that students' enjoyment, which can then connect to motivation, can be higher in self-selected groups. And then the disadvantage can be that the groups can be quite homogeneous. And also that students then don't get the opportunity to work with people they don't know, people who are different from them, etc. And so that can be some of the disadvantages. All right, so how about instructor-selected groups? A lot of what we know is just what we know from trying things or what we hear from other people, and a lot of common sense. So having a more heterogeneous group is better than a very homogeneous group. You want to avoid singling out students, such as if you have a male or a female dominated classroom, you don't want to then take one man and put it into each group, or one student of color in each group that way. And so just try to avoid avoid that sort of tokenism, if you will, when you're selecting groups. Some instructors like to get to know their students a little bit and maybe try to mix personalities that way so that the groups are heterogeneous. Some people like to make groups based upon abilities, and I often do this. Some work out of Melanie Cooper's group has shown us that students of all abilities, the highest performers and the lowest performers, tend to improve their problem solving skills by working in groups. And the magic number she came up with is they get 10% smarter. So that's 10% is huge in education. I mean, that's a really powerfully strong benefit there. An exception to that is if sort of lower scorers were paired with lower scorers, they didn't see that type of a benefit. And if they paired middle scorers with lower scores, the middle scorers improved 20% in their problem solving abilities. So that's a really impressive result. So one quick and dirty way I sometimes make groups is if I have my first sort of homework and quiz scores and those kinds of things, I'll rank the students. And then what I'll do is I'll take the top half of the rank and I'll just pull it out and slide it down here and match them this way. So therefore, a top student is paired with a middle student, and a middle student is paired with a low student. And I've had really good success from making groups or pairs or whatever that way. And also it's pretty easy. So all you have to do is plop your spreadsheet down. All right, so that's the first point, was about setting up groups. The second point is that students can learn how to be good group members. And what I find is that this takes a lot of practice, a lot of reassurance, a lot of reminding, like all things when we try to teach them to our students. And so how can we help students learn to be good group members? One is that we can start with some team building exercises. So I prefer to keep groups together for a while, for several weeks, so they can get to know one another. And then I might switch up after a month or at midterms or something like that. But I do try to keep a group together at least so that they can work together several times and get to know each other. So there's tons of icebreakers and games, and it's nice if they choose a team name, etc. And you can find tons of stuff on the internet. And if you can make it chemistry related, it's even more fun then. So some sort of team building, a get to know you kind of thing. The next thing I use a lot are roles, and I'll share something with you later that's mostly lifted from POGIL stuff. Assigning roles to students clarifies what's expected of them and helps them focus on, oh yeah, this is my job, I gotta make sure I do my job. And it encourages students to be good group citizens and to do some behaviors that they might not normally engage in. So they really need to learn how to be good group members, and having roles can help them learn that. I do it what I'll do in my upper level classes, when I'm in Gen Chem, I'll typically do roles throughout the whole year kind of thing. In inorganic, I maybe will do it for the first month and then say, all right, you guys know how to do this. I'm not assigning roles anymore. Another way to help students learn to be good group members is to use group reflection, and I'll share a tool that I use for that. And so some sort of either both individual and group self-evaluation done periodically can help them develop their skills as well. So these are the things that I think we sometimes forget, that if we want students to learn how to work in groups, we have to help them do that. All right, so here it says, see the handouts available on Viper. So again, I stole this essentially from a 5 slides on Viper about group work that I put up on Viper. All right, so the first thing was how to make groups. The second one was how to help students learn to be good group members. And the third point is designing group activities for success. And so a lot of this came from Johnson & Johnson, some engineering, and Carl Smith, people from Minnesota. This is, even though this is getting a little dated at this point in time, I still find this some of the best advice on how to set up group activities. And so in terms of design, you want to sort of build in this concept of positive interdependence. And so what that means is that that there is some sort of group goal, and you can only get there if everybody pulls their weight, kind of thing. So you can do this by assigning roles, by giving limited information to each student, so sort of almost like a jigsaw kind of a thing, so that they have to come together. So there are some design techniques to build in that positive interdependence, like the Three Musketeers, all for one and one for all. And then next, of course, there needs to be individual accountability. So no slackers, right? No social loafing. And so some ways to make sure you ensure individual accountability are to keep your group sizes relatively small, test students individually, as well as maybe looking at their group work, observing groups, peer evaluation of groups, peer evaluating one another, etc. I don't do a lot. I don't do things where I say like grade your group members kind of stuff, because I just don't think that's fair to students. But I know a lot of people do that and it works well for them. It's just never worked that great for me. But having them sort of talk together about how their group is working has worked well for me. All right, so yeah, no excuses, individual accountability. Lots of times what I'll do is maybe do a quiz or something, and in one color, and then hand out red pens and have them rework the quiz in their group, talking to one another and taking their notes in red pen, so I can see what they did individually and what they did as a group. Face-to-face promotive interaction. So that's, oops, where'd it go? There it is. So eye to eye, knee to knee, that's not something that we're gonna do right now. So I don't think it's the end of the world. Like I said, I've really enjoyed doing small group stuff on Zoom. All right. Help students build their skills. So we've already talked about this idea of role playing, of assigning roles, etc. And so being conscious of those skills that they need to develop. Keep calm and role play. And then last but not least, I had mentioned already group processing, and this idea of having the students sort of stop and reflect together on what worked and what didn't work, and what they could improve, and celebrate their successes. All right, so that was on design. So I said I would share a couple things with you. So this is something I adapted from POGIL materials that I like to use. So for example, one year I taught with group folders, and I taped this on the inside of every single group folder. I was involved in a discussion group this summer, and we sort of would have we'd put these rules up, not these ones specifically, but for the discussion group, we'd put them up in the front of every discussion and just say, remember this, etc., whatever. In this case, there are 5 roles here. So I don't typically use 5. It depends. If I have a 5-person group, I might use 5, but often I'm working in 3 or 4-person groups. So just to go through these briefly, what this table has is what the name of the role is, what that person does, and things that they might say. And so that students really like that. Students really like to know, how do I say this? And so giving them some little leads on what they might say, they really appreciate. They will use them. So the manager is the person that gets the group going, makes sure that that everybody knows what the task is, and sort of launches things on their way. The presenter or spokesperson, or I guess I would really call this the reporter perhaps, is the one that's going to present back to the class when they're all done. Often if they can have time to practice real quick in front of their group before they have to do it, that's really helpful. The recorder writes everything down, and especially if it's some sort of a discussion, they might be the note taker on the group discussion to try to catch the main points that are made. Or if you're using shared whiteboards or something, the person would be the one recording things on the shared whiteboard. And then the reflector is the one that's really hard for students. And so the reflector observes and comments on group dynamics and behavior with respect to the learning process. What does that mean? So they're the one that would, for example, when the group's kind of stuck on something, they might say, all right, let me summarize what we've set up until now. Here's where we're stuck, or something that kind of helps with moving things forward when a group gets stuck. Again, the reflector is a role that often in a chemistry class I might not use, But in my gen ed classes where we're doing discussions, that you can see in things that they might say, it seems that Horton and Burness differ on this. Do we need to resolve this argument? You know, so if there's two people arguing it out, the reflector can kind of step in and say, hey, I see we don't agree. Can we just like move forward anyway and just agree to disagree kind of thing? Or they might be the person that says, oh, you know, one person is dominating the conversation. Can we hear from somebody else, etc. I usually explain to my students that really truly shy introverted students often benefit from being invited to participate. So I expect my reflector to look at the student who hasn't said anything and say, Fred, would you like, you know, do you have something to add here? And Fred can say no, and that's fine. But oftentimes, if you just wait, Fred will have something to say when they're invited at that point in time. And my friends here know that that's often the role that I play, is to sort of step in and say, hey, we haven't heard from X. And then last but not least, the encourager, every student's favorite role. So the encourager's job is to say, wow, that's a great idea, every so often. And so when I do visit my rooms, I make sure that the encourager has something to say while I'm there visiting. And when we're in person, I can kind of shout out to the whole group, or I can broadcast it on Zoom and sort of say, I haven't heard much encouragement lately. And then usually the encourager will step in. All right, so I typically use sort of a group facilitator manager person. I use, and that manager person may, you know, anyway, manager person, then like a recorder, reporter person, and an encourager are sort of how I use these roles here. The other thing I mentioned is group reflection and group processing in terms of helping students build their skills with working in a group. And so here's something that I've mishmashed from different sources that the students can use as a group after they've finished a problem-solving session or a discussion or something. I don't use this more than a couple times because it gets old fast, but using it 2 or 3 times is helpful to students. So with the members in your group, what are 2 new things you learned? What are 2 things your group did well together? And they enjoy putting that down. List 1 thing your group could improve. And always the answer is not get sidetracked as much. It's pretty much the standard response there. So just that short group processing is incredibly powerful in building good group skills. Also, you can do individual kinds of considerations. So here, you know, by yourself, check the response you most agree with. So overall, I learned lots, some, none. I participated, I enjoyed. So again, what kind of a group citizen were you? Evaluate yourself here. How about the general dynamics? Did you get through the agenda? Do you think everyone participated? Were the leadership functions distributed? Did everybody play a role at some point in time? So getting them to think about what is it that makes a group work. And then at the bottom here, check your own and circle those that you observed in others. Again, teaching, this is, you know, what are positive roles? You initiate, you ask for information, you ask for reactions, you keep track of time, you encourage, you throw in a tension releaser, like a joke every so often or so. And what are negative roles? Sidetracking, interrupting, monopolizing discussion, and so on, apologizing too much. So that's a way to help them see what these skills are. All right, so I'm going to talk briefly about Zoom, but again, there's probably people here that know more than I do. So just a couple things real quick. Make sure that breakout rooms are enabled when you set up your Zoom room. So in settings, there's a way to do that. And then when you're in Zoom, there's an icon at the bottom, depending on what kind of device you're at. And if you haven't learned this, if you're on your phone or your iPad or your computer, Zoom is slightly different in terms of what the controls are. So when working with students, I always have to know kind of what device they're on. But usually if you scroll to the bottom, you'll see all the icons pop up. And there's one that says breakout room. So you click on that and you get a pop-up window. Nobody else can see that pop-up window. You're the only one that can see it, okay? And it gives you a choice here. So assign the participants into X rooms. So Zoom will look at your 30 students that you have or your 100 students that you have and put them in 6 rooms or something like that. Zoom will take a guess. And then it'll tell you there are 6 rooms with 5 people in each room. And you say, no, 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 I want smaller groups. So you can change that 6 to 7 or 8 and it'll reshuffle the rooms automatically for you. The other thing that I do is I'll look at, it shows me who's in which room. So once you've decided how many rooms you want, you click on create breakout rooms, the button there, and it will pop up and show you who's in which room. And at this point in time, you can move people. So for example, if I ended up randomly with my 3 top students all in one group, I would move them and spread them out into some of the other groups at this point in time. And the students can't see this. They don't know you're moving them around at this point in time. All right, so I get everybody settled, and then I click on open all rooms, and I get a new window that looks like this. And you can either let the students go to the rooms on their own. You can set your settings so that it pushes them into a room automatically. It's really kind of up to you. It's nice if the students can go to their rooms and come back from their room to ask you a question automatically. Is kind of a nice thing. Another thing I use a lot in Zoom, so then I will go through the groups, and if I have, say, 5 groups, I will go and visit each one. So there's a little button on the right that says join the group. You click on that, takes about 4 seconds, 5 seconds, and it'll put you into their room. I usually announce myself in case they're not paying attention that I'm there now. And I ask them where they are, you know, what are you stuck on? What are you doing, kind of thing. I just make a quick visit, and then I'm on my way. When they have 5 minutes to go or so, at the bottom here, there's a thing that says broadcast a message to all. So I might click on that and say, hey, I'm going to call you back in about 5. Finish up, please. Get your reporter ready to report out. They do that. And then I can close the rooms. And again, in settings, you can set it so that they can come back on their own. They can have like a minute or so to come back. And after a minute, it will force them back in. Or you can make that shorter or longer, however you want to set it up. The other thing that I do that I didn't say is when I have my list of who's in which room, if they don't have specific roles that they know of or whatever, before I send them off, I will just go, all right, you know, John, you're the manager in this group. Fred, you're the manager in that group. Susie, you're the manager in that group, etc. And when they go off, so they know who's responsible for getting the conversation started. They will have a very specific task. They have to report when they come back, and they will have something they have to turn in from this. Otherwise, nothing happens. So it's very important that there's an accountability piece in there for those groups. And boy, when they know they have to turn it in or report out, they work really hard. Last but not least, I just copied this from the Zoom window. For those of you with 150, 200 students, you need to set up your rooms in advance. I have not done this, but the key thing is that each of them must have a Zoom account. So hopefully with their college university password. And that when they are using Zoom, they're using it through their account, or else it won't work, kind of thing. So students will need to learn how to use Zoom correctly so that this pre-assignment of students works. So you can make a spreadsheet of your groups and upload it into Zoom, and it'll set those groups up automatically for you ahead of time, which is kind of nice. And you do that all within the Zoom portal or the web client or whatever. Under settings, there are places to do all of that work. So again, this I just took off the Zoom window. All right, so last but not least, the 3 points I made: how to set up groups, different ways to do that, how to help students learn to be good group members, and then how to design activities to maximize group success. And that's it. I'm gonna stop sharing there, and we can talk.
Thanks, Joanne. Does anyone have any questions or anything they want to bring up? I am prepared to put us into breakout rooms and get us discussing. But if there are any general questions first, please, we'd love to hear them.
Janice has one.
Oh. Yeah, I have a question. Has anyone used a TA to help with the breakout rooms so that there are 2 people checking in on the varying breakout rooms? Or does anyone have ideas how to optimally do that?
So with Zoom, technology-wise, it's my understanding that only one person can surf in and out of the rooms.
Okay. Are they able to send messages when they're in a breakout room to other people? So could they send a private message to the TA, we'd like to see you in breakout room 2 or something like that? So I know they can ask for help from the person in charge, but when they're in a breakout room, can they send private messages to one another?
Does anybody know? Because I'm not aware that they can. So one thing they can do, and maybe again, somebody else might want to jump in here. So one thing they can do, Janice, is everybody can come in and out of rooms.
Mm-hmm.
And so, for example, if the TA was assigned to go into room 3, they could go into room 3, help out.
Mm-hmm.
They can come back out of room 3, and then you could send them to room 2. And then you could send them, you can change them to send to room 4. But somebody needs to be in charge of who's in what room.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Joanne, this is Jeff.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Janice, to add a little bit to what Joanne shared there, people can private message within the room that they're in. So there will be a chat feature that will open up in that, but they won't. So the best is that if a student does have something they need the faculty member to come back to the main room, although you yourself may want to jump into each of the rooms.
Mm-hmm.
People can't assign, so administratively, you can make your TA a co-host.
Mm-hmm.
The co-host is not allowed to it doesn't have the ability to put people in rooms, but if someone has a co-host title, they can move themselves. So they don't actually have to come to you, they could move that. So that is the little piece, if they have co-hosts. So it is one, and we did a workshop with Viper where we thought about making everybody a co-host and then they could just move as will. We decided not to because your co-host also has the ability to end the meeting and other things like that. So we wanted to keep that to a minimum, but a TA that you trust, they will get put in a room to start with, but then they will have a feature where they can move wherever they would like within that. But yeah, within a room, the students can. So if they really do need help, they should send a representative back to the main room and then wait for yourself or a TA to show up.
Okay.
I think one of my colleagues has done a lot of use of TAs and has had like a TA in charge of like 3 or 4 breakout rooms that they would float between.
Mm-hmm.
So that does work.
Amanda.
Yeah, I was going to echo some of that, but there's a feature of the breakout rooms that I learned about more recently that I didn't know existed, is that if you go into the additional options button, you can actually set the amount of time that you want the breakout rooms to be in existence, and it puts a little timer at the top of the screen in the breakout room, which is really nice. So if you tell them you have 20 minutes to do this, then it actually counts down so they know when they're starting to run out of time. So that's a really handy feature if you don't know about that already.
Lewis.
Hi, I had a question for Jeff about the TA being assigned as a co-host. So what does the TA see on his or her screen so that they can go to that specific room?
Yes. I'm trying to remember because it's one that I've only played with on the other side. Essentially, they get put into a room and then they have like a little thing that shows all of the rooms and who's in there, and then they can move from there.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, this is one of those things to definitely practice. And
Yeah.
set up, and we have joked about in terms of when you do workshops, like have a producer, like someone who's just in charge of your tech, and that may be a role that you want to have a TA to do, like just camp out in the main room. I'm going to be the person that goes in.
So if I could jump in with, I have a couple comments and then a question, and we'll see how long my connection holds up if I keep the video on. This is bad time of day for my Zoom. I do almost my whole inorganic course by group work because I do POGIL for 95% of it. One of the things I sort of tweak the most in the POGIL guidelines is actually the group, the roles. I really like the roles. I've always hated the POGIL titles. I find them kind of dull and awkward. So I never liked manager because you have problems that need to be managed. So I found that actually just with some different names, the students get much more excited about them. So I have a team captain, which sometimes gets rolled in with a spokesperson. I'll talk about a scribe, and then I use an analyst. So those are my 3 or 4 roles. Joanne, you didn't talk about a scribe. So for mine, I have one person in charge of making sure that all of the group's records are correct. Now, the first couple days, I will intentionally collect the scribe's copy of the activity, but later on, I'll just randomly pick one. The idea being that the scribe has to make sure everybody's is all good so I can pick any one of them up. A couple other odds and ends on the roles. So I use an analyst as kind of a catch-all for technical tasks. In particular, I also have a summary sheet like you do where they have to evaluate. So my analyst is particularly in an evaluation role. When I get to symmetry, I also make the analyst manipulate the models. They're in charge of the models for the group, so they're really excited about that. And that's sort of my catch-all for technical tasks. In terms of group buy-in, this is role buy-in. This is weird, but in class, my chairperson paid a lot of money. I have small groups and small classes for little wooden desk plaques. And if I were in my office at the college, I'd show you one, but like, you know, wood burned plaques with the names on them. And it's really, really interesting, the psychological effect of that. When they have a plaque that says they are the captain or they are the spokesperson, they get much more excited about the role. Before that, I use little paper cards, but it's funny, the psychological weight of that artifact. Now, I'm off campus for this fall. So what I'm gonna have them do is make them change their Zoom labels. We're gonna talk about how to do, you know, your little title there. That's gonna be their title. And I hope that adds a similar weight to it.
I can say, "Oh, Captain, my Captain," you know.
Oh,
That's
they
awesome.
do. They
really
do.
like
Yeah,
that.
yeah. Again, just it's funny having more exciting names in those plaques. Just I've been doing this for a long time now. Really had a substantial effect, more than I would have guessed, in terms of the buy-in for the roles and really accepting that. My one question for Joanne, as she escapes, mine, I have small classes and small groups, so it tends to be much easier to facilitate than I think folks have to deal with lecture halls and TAs. I'm lucky that way. Every few years, I just get a lemon. And so I've only got, you know, maybe 3 groups, sometimes only 2 in my class, 2 groups. And I have a student who is either so socially annoying and inept, or someone who is one of those people who is the deadly combination of weak, obstinate, and assertive, such that I have students coming back to me a few weeks in saying, I can't work with this, I don't want to work with this person. And I completely emphasize those things. Yeah, I don't want to work with that guy either. That's actually where I have the most trouble with group work. I have no solution for that. So those are my bum semesters where it's just, I get one of those students coming through. So any thoughts you can share on that, I would love.
Yeah, I think I'll throw, so there's a couple things going on there. One is, you know, we use the phrase sort of neurodivergent now. And at my school, I have a number of students who would fall into that category. And each one of them has their own sort of special set of skills that they bring. And so for me, it's always been an individual decision to make. And so in some cases, you know, for example, one year, this student happened to be out of the classroom, had to leave the classroom for something. And the other students sort of giggled a little bit as the student left the classroom. And I looked at all of them and I said, hey, so we all know Chris, right? And they're like, yeah, we know Chris, you know. And I said, well, Chris is a special kind of kid, right? And they're like, yeah, Chris is a special kind of kid. And I said, and we love Chris, right? Because at Hope College, we love each other at Hope College, and we're all inspired by God and everything. And so I can use all of that language. And I said, so we're all gonna come together and help Chris be successful, right? And boy, after Chris came back in the classroom, the whole place had just changed, and we were all on Chris's side at that point in time. And so it's just been very, you know, usually so my approach to doing that is this huge sort of outpouring of love for this person. So how can we embrace this person and bring them in to sort of minimize the damage that they're doing? If it's again, I'm not necessarily, if it's a person who is truly a difficult person. Janice and I were in a group a number of years ago, and one of the things we worked on together was how to best deal with difficult people. Now, we were not talking about students at the time, we were talking about colleagues. But nonetheless, I think that lots of times helping the other students understand that we're all in this together. The other thing is, I think if I had a student who really, again, this is just me. I think it's important that all the students learn how to work in groups and practice their skills and stuff. But I've had students for whom it would just be simply too much. It really would. So there have been times when I have found ways to enable some students to work more independently if it's just too hard for everybody. But anyways, let me throw it out to everybody else and kind of hear what I'm kind of mixing up difficult people and neurodivergency, and I don't mean to put those in the same category, and I'm sorry, but just these people that really struggle to work in groups.
Chris.
Me?
Hammaker.
Oh,
Yep.
sorry. So, yeah, as I mentioned before we started, I've been thrown into teaching online. I was actually somewhat lucky. I was on sabbatical in the spring, so I didn't have to transition my class to online. But I also didn't get anything done the second half of the semester. When you do the group feedback, because I've always done a lot of group activities in this. It's the first semester in organic class that I'm going to be teaching in the fall. How do you collect the feedback? Do you have do you put a form in your course management system? Do you have them email it? Do you have them upload a document? Those are the kind of things that I'm trying to figure out, how to get that feedback from the group.
Yeah, well, in the past, it's been, by paper and handouts and stuff. What I would probably do now is I'd probably use a Google form to collect that kind of information. And either a group could do a Google form together, or individuals could do a Google form. That's probably what I would do.
Well, Anne was revolting, so I'm going to cave into Anne's request and set up some breakout rooms with a Google form I just posted in the chat for you to do a little reporting in. And maybe let's give you a task, something along the lines of, what are you most concerned about with doing groups, especially online?
Hey, Chip,
Yeah, go, Joanne.
could you make Lewis a co-host so we can play and see if he can get from room to room?
I will. Yeah.
And maybe somebody else as well. I don't know. So Lewis, is that okay? Can you be a co-host?
Yeah, that's fine. Thanks.
Sure. Done. Well, so we'll give you maybe 9 minutes or so we can all report back in, and we'll see what you discuss. All right, let's go ahead and just get a little reporting out and see what some groups talked about. I know group 1 is still typing, so I'm going to jump to Ellen, who's reporting for group 2. Put her on the spot.
So we had good discussions about breakout rooms, and so we're all concerned about getting group buy-in so that the students are actually participating in those groups. In the classroom, I think it's pretty easy to tell when groups are lost or when they're not talking to each other, but how can we get group buy-in so that they actually work together? And then how do we know where to go, which group needs the most help, and where we need to go? And then we also had a question about verifiable accounts. What does that mean? And how do we know if they have a verifiable account for those permanent breakout rooms?
I think it means, I'm going to jump in, I think it means that when they registered for Zoom, they used their college email address.
Okay.
Which a lot of the first years probably didn't. So last night I did my CSV for the 9 people in my department, and I tried to set up the breakout rooms ahead of time with that CSV. And it was failing because there was one name on that list that didn't have an email. Like, the email I provided wasn't the one linked to their Zoom account. So the CSV that I set up for that pre-arranging was using people's email accounts. So that's just a thing to make clear, I guess, from the beginning, if you're going to use that.
Ellen, this is Jeff Raker. Long time no see since our Purdue days.
I know.
So it's essentially that, and they also have to be logged in under that email. So they have to be signed into that email and accessing the Zoom link in order for it to, when they try to join then as a verified account.
Let's jump to group 4 since their reporter is about to leave.
Yeah, so we talked about several things. One being mixed or set groups. So like they're saying maybe in an upper division, they would mix up the group each time because the students already know each other. But in Gen Chem, it might be a good idea to do a set group for like an exam period. Maybe not the whole class, but an exam period, and then rotate after each exam or the whole class. And then there was mention of the idea of you can have, if you want to set, if you kind of want students to pick their own groups, you can have them change their name to have like, I want to work on this type of problem after their name, and then they can go into the groups. Then talking about the buy-in and getting them to actually do something, and so you don't just show up and see them not doing stuff. And one is, you know, having some assignment, but also having them talking about the why of group work before you do groups. So like saying, this is why we're doing group work explicitly, not just it's good to do group work. And then there was brief discussion of like, how do we, of seeing what the students are doing. So using Jamboards or like we did with the Google Doc, because you can pull up a whiteboard in your group and like doodle and stuff, but your professor won't see that unless you join that group. Anyway, those are the things we talked about.
Okay. Group 1.
Okay, I think I was at our group. Some of us are rather still terrified of what's about to happen at our campuses. I think most of the people in my breakout group had remote classes only. I think I'm doing the kind of high flex. Some students will be in my classroom, but not all of them at the same time, and we'll be watching videos and so forth. What kind of concern was all the available technology out there. You know, we really don't know what the best fit will be, so we're just going to try to figure it out. For my campus, some of the technology that was ordered back in May didn't come in until like this past week, so we just now tried to use some things, and we're like, oh, this didn't really work the way we thought it would be. But even some of the how we would just for like class activities, what kind of forms we'll be using, how to interact with the LMS, just things of that nature. We're all very new to this.
Nicole, group 3.
Hi. So our group was kind of focused on 2 different ideas with the physical space. One being, how do you do physical manipulations of models in virtual space, like for solid state and symmetry and things like that. And then the other kind of half of that was, how do you do group work when students have to be socially distanced if they're actually in the classroom? So those were kind of the 2 things that I would say were our takeaways between that.
Can I say something? So,
yeah.
So a couple things. One is that, and this will lead up to what our group talked about as well, and that is this sort of, you know, I live in a pretty rural location, and technology is not, I mean, when our power went out yesterday or the day before, I have nothing. I have no internet. I have no cell service. I got nothing, kind of thing. And so I'm really cautious about going as low tech as I possibly can go. And so one thing, and I've talked about this on Discord a bunch of times. So my students for Gen Chem are required to buy whiteboards. We're a Google Docs campus. We use Google Docs for everything. So I have no problem working on shared Google Docs and all that kind of stuff. But I've told my students that both in the classroom, because we're going to have some in-person stuff, and remotely, when we're doing remotely, they have to have their whiteboard there. Because it turns out you can see it really well. It's really low tech, and you can kind of share ideas. And then when we're in the classroom, we've been told our students have to face forward all the time, you know, so we can't move chairs, we can't do nothing. But 2 students 6 feet apart can flash their whiteboard at each other. And I'm going to try it and see kind of how it works out. So I'm going to have students in pairs working on stuff using whiteboards to do it. That's what I'm going to try. I'll let you know how it goes.
The other solution is wait another 12 hours or so when your school declares that you're going all online, as they continue to drop like flies.
We got all our COVID. I can tell we got all our COVID results. We're starting Monday, and we tested everybody before school started. So I can tell you more about that on another day.
Was that your group then, Joanne? That's
well. So group 5 was actually Lewis was in our group initially, and I want him to talk about bouncing between groups.
Sure. You have to be made a co-host, and so as a co-host, I was initially assigned to group 5, and to bounce it back and forth, I always have to go back to group 5, and there's a lower button, and then I don't see it now, but I did see it when I was a co-host. There's a breakout room icon with 4 little squares. I can only see that breakout icon when I'm in group 5, the very first group that Zoom assigned me to. Then once I hit that icon from group 5, and only from group 5, I can join the other 4 groups. But
yeah, so if he hit leave, it would take him back to the main window. But if he hit the group icon thing, it would pop up and let him choose what other group he wanted to go to.
Correct. And so that might be a way for the TAs to move from group to group.
good deal. Oh, I'm glad we could actively problem solve for that. Get you some experience with it. Did we have another group out there? There was a group 6. Anybody from group 6 have anything they want to share?
Yes, we mostly kind of talked about the logistics of, you know, how do you, if you have a large class, how do you get people organized into groups, and how do you make sure that they're actually doing anything? So we talked about Google Docs or, you know, shared Word documents, and kind of how you set that up in advance so you can keep your eye on what all your different groups of students are working on.
Great. Does anyone have any final questions or comments? I know Shirley's got something she wants to say here in a minute, but I don't want to shut anyone else out.
I'd like to ask a question.
Yeah, go
Joanne
ahead.
in the group. So I used a lot of Viper resources in my inorganic class, and ordinarily I would be printing out handouts and giving them to students, but now we're totally online, and I'm wondering if anyone has a favorite or most effective way to distribute those kinds of handouts that students would ordinarily write on and then turn back in. If you convert it all to like a Google Doc or what do you think works best?
Amanda, do you want to say something?
Yeah, so I've heard mostly, I'm in the process of trying some of this, so I can't tell you how well it's going to work. It partly would depend on if your campus is a Google campus or an Microsoft campus. Mm-hmm. But in either case, so we're a Microsoft campus. So what I've been told now is that there's Microsoft Office 365 plugin for our LMS, which is Canvas. And so if I create an Office 365 Word document and then make an assignment with that as the external tool, when a student opens that assignment, it will create a copy of my Office 365 document that they can then work, and it saves in their own folder, and then they can submit straight from Office 365. So that's kind of convoluted, but I think the Google platform works similarly. If you create a Google Doc and make that the assignment, then it will just create a blank copy of that they can then submit as their work. So it's kind of the idea of the worksheets.
Yeah, so Google Docs can be set up so that when they click on the Google Doc link, it forces a copy, same kind of way, which is nice. And then the other thing I did, back to low-tech kinds of things, I have to be honest, what I did lots of times was just put the docs up on my Moodle site, and then I let them on white paper just write their answers, and I just, low-tech as possible. I'm a huge fan of Adobe Scan. And so my students did a lot of pictures, Adobe Scan things, and PDFs, and uploaded PDF things as their results. And I'm planning on doing that quite a bit this semester as well. Just write it on your own paper, send it to me.
Yeah, I'm playing around with the Microsoft Teams and the class notebook function because well, our school didn't get the plugin, so Microsoft can talk to Moodle efficiently. So that's kind of off the table. But thank you, those are good ideas.
There is, I have a colleague who's like knows all kinds of stuff about Teams. So if you want to send me a specific question, I can try and find the answer for you, because I believe there is a way within the class notebook to do some of that.
Any other questions or anything real quick to finish up? If not, Shirley's going to tell us about our next SLiTHER, which will be a week from today.
Yeah, just really quick, everyone. I know that obviously COVID is changing how we teach, but I anticipate that it's also changing and affecting how we assess student learning. So next week's SLiTHER will be a short presentation, and then the best part, the roundtable discussion about using literature discussions as a way to assess student learning. And I'll be presenting a particular example from spring 2019 that we used in my department.
So the announcement of that is on Viper. It's been sent out through social media. It's in the Discord. There's a sign up for it, but it looks like we're going to be sticking with the same bat time, same bat channel, Thursdays at 4 o'clock. I think we have 3 more scheduled, and then we'll probably move to a bi-weekly format after that. So please come on back. With that, I'm going to officially end the recording.